What is Stoicism really? Is it going to turn us into robots, or is it going to help us enjoy life more? Join us as Brendan and I explore this ancient philosophy. The Via Stoica Podcast with Brendan and Benny. Powered by viastoica.com, your home for coaching, workshops, quotes, and Stoic content that inspires. Welcome to the Via Stoica Podcast. I'm Benny Vonken. I'm here with my good friend Brendan. Brendan, how are you doing?
Benny, I am fantastic. Doing pretty good. Having a wonderful day here out in Panama. How are things over there for you?
I'm doing well. I'm in ancient Greece. Well, not in ancient Greece. I'm in Greece and Athens.
Time travel.
But this
Nice.
is where time traveling. Yeah, that would have been nice. But I am where where Stoicism was originated, and I think that is a great segue to answer this following question. I'm going to dive right into it as I'm going to ask it to you, Brendan. Brendan, what is Stoicism?
Great question, Benny. To me, Stoicism, simply, Stoicism is an ancient philosophy founded 2,000 years ago, over 2,000 years ago, by a man named Zeno. But really, at its core, what it does is it's a philosophy that focuses on virtues and pursuing virtue and living in accordance with nature. You know, some of the big names that people might be aware of are Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus. Those are kind of the three biggest that we know because it's the most writings we have. But there's also plenty of modern day examples. We can get into that throughout the episode. But really, at the core of it is it's a philosophy about ultimately pursuing virtue and bettering yourself and trying to improve and focusing on the collective. Really, you know, not just a selfish philosophy, not one of only pursuing things for yourself, but truly pursuing things for the good of the whole. And that's to me what Stoicism is at its core. But Benny, for you, how would you define Stoicism?
Yeah, I liked what you said. And for me, Stoicism, I always start with kind of comparing it with Buddhism. For me, Stoicism is more of a Western, more pragmatic version of Buddhism, where the Buddhists would work towards nirvana, right? That enlightenment. The Stoics would work to the state of eudaimonia, the good spirit state, or like finding peace and tranquility. And the great thing is that they had a lot of great tools, and they were kind of ahead of themselves in time with learning how people think and how the minds work and how we interact with the world. That's why it's the source of inspiration for cognitive behavioral therapy and other modern day therapies. And they really know that they have this kind of separation of like, okay, what should we focus on and what shouldn't we focus on? And as you said, it's big in community, but also in that internal. So it's this kind of dual workings between ourselves and the world around us. But again, they use virtue. They use, in living in accordance with that nature, with the logos. And the big part of that is rational thinking, to use reason and logic in everything that we do. And that's where it kind of brings it down from maybe some more spiritual philosophies like Buddhism to a more grounded philosophy in where we are here and right now, and focusing on actions, what we've got to do, making sure that our judgments are based on the truth, investigating that, and really taking that agency and responsibility to ourselves to make sure that we are not overreacting or reacting out of bad emotions, but letting our good actions feed us with good emotions and then reaching that eudaimonic state.
Well said, Benny. I'm glad you brought up reason and logic. I don't know how I left that out of the conversation, but glad, that's why you come behind me and sweep up the mess I left. No, but that's really good. Thank you for sharing that. And I think, one thing we both hit on was the virtues. So maybe we could go over that and kind of talk about what the four virtues are. So Benny, if you could tell the listeners, what are the four virtues, and then kind of a brief understanding of each of them.
Yeah, so the Stoics say pretty much based on the Cynics, because Zeno, as Brendan said at the beginning, he was the founder of Stoicism, and he kind of mashed up a few philosophies like Cynicism. We have from the academics based on Plato's philosophy, the Megarians, and he kind of put some things together. And he took from the Cynics, apart from other things, he said like virtue is the only good, right? That's all we need to live a good life, to be virtuous. And we can split them up into four cardinal virtues, where we have wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage. And they're all pretty much knowledge, things that we need to know, right? We live out of experience, but also out of theory and know what they are. So they're all like four parts of knowledge. And wisdom is really that knowledge of knowing what to do and how to make the right judgments and to use that reason and logic with all the experience that we have, that we've gained, right? We mix the knowledge and everything together, and we use that in our daily lives to make those decisions and to really judge what the right thing is, to really assent to the right impression. Then we have justice. Brendan mentioned also like Stoicism is a philosophy of interconnectedness where we're all connected. So the justice is really based on what is fair for the community, what is fair for the bigger thing, what is reasonable to do in that sense. We have the courage, right? And this is where people might go wrong. Courage isn't necessarily doing something that's dangerous or fearful, but it's knowing what the right thing to do is. That's why we need wisdom and justice. And then, even if it is dangerous or even if it goes against our wants and desires, we do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. That's where we need that courage. So it's not just doing things that are dangerous or scary. No, we need to know what the right thing to do is and then doing it no matter what the consequences are for us as an individual. But it always contributes to the bigger picture. And then we have temperance, moderation. One that I struggle with is to do things like kind of on according to Aristotle's golden mean, to make sure that you do things moderate, not in excess, not too little, not too much, but just at the right interval of times that we have to do it. And those are kind of the four parts of the virtues that I look. But Brendan, how do you see the virtues and what do they mean to you?
Yeah. So for me, the virtues are kind of the basic building blocks. So I think it's good. It's a good place to start there, because once you have an understanding of the four and how they kind of interplay and intermingle with one another, I think that helps kind of start to build that framework of the for the rest of the philosophy. I love what you said too about, it's when it comes to courage, it's not about pursuing necessarily our wants and desires. It's about doing the right thing. So acknowledging that sometimes the right thing and what we want are not the same, because that's where life is really hard. And that's why I think the idea of the virtues and getting to know them can help you get through those things, because it's those moments in our life when we want to choose one option but we know the other one is the right one. Those are the decisions in our life that really make who we are. It's not whether we decide to have coffee or tea that morning. It's whether we decided to do the right thing when faced with adversity. So I think it's really important to understand the virtues and how they interact in your own life, because I think that's a very nice way to learn about yourself. As we've talked about before, the kind of the point or the goal of philosophy is to know thyself, is to understand ourselves and how we interact and interplay with the rest of society and the world. And if I think doing that and understanding yourself through the lens of the virtues, when am I acting with wisdom? When do I not act with wisdom? Where are the areas of my life where I am just? Where are the areas of my life where I'm not just? Like, just using these four kind of areas, I think, is a very good way to start to examine some of the areas in your life that might be giving you trouble, or it will highlight some of the habits that maybe you want to consider changing or tweaking as you move along on your journey. Because one kind of core idea of Stoicism is that we are all a work in progress. We are all trying to improve over time and reach that goal of what the Stoics call the sage, the person that acts in virtue 100% of the time. But we also at the same time know that that's not possible. We accept that I'm not going to act in virtue 100% of the time, but I'm going to keep coming back to the virtues, and I'm going to keep testing myself against them so that I can keep improving and becoming a better person, which ultimately serves the community better, serves my family, my friends, my colleagues better when I'm that person who's pursuing virtue. So to me, it's virtue is the measuring stick that we use to kind of determine what direction we need to go in, or what direction we need to start pursuing more or less of. So yeah, that's to me is what the virtues mean, and I think that is where they can be most powerful.
Nice. I like also how you talked about the measuring stick. That's a big part of one of the discourses in Epictetus as well, where he talks about where do we measure the good life. And I do believe that it's part of a virtue, but also one of the other big parts is like, and immediately starting to debunk some of the ideas that people have about Stoicism, is that it's an individualistic philosophy, that you just focus on yourself, right? But it is really about the bigger nature. It's really about us being connected, being a small part of something a lot bigger. And that's what we've got to work towards. But how do you view that, and how would you debunk that myth of Stoicism being this lone wolf individualistic philosophy, but yet something bigger?
I mean, there certainly are aspects of Stoicism that you could cherry pick and say, oh, this is telling me that I need to go and off and by myself and be super disciplined and rigid with myself and da da da. But I think it's important to remember the why behind everything, and that the why behind why we pursue virtue and why we want to practice this philosophy is that so we are ultimately better people to participate in the world with, right? It's my belief that someone who has the virtues of wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage will play better in the world, do more positive in the world than someone who doesn't have those virtues. So yeah, that is what I think about when it comes to kind of the community aspect, is the why behind it. Because yes, it is individualistic in the sense of I'm going to work. It's one of the biggest components is the dichotomy of control. And the big thing in the dichotomy of control is you focus on what you can control and you ignore everything that you can't. And everything that you can control is your thoughts, your opinions, and your actions. It has everything to do with you. So I understand, I can be empathetic to the idea that people kind of hear some aspects of Stoic philosophy and say, yep, that's an individualistic lone wolf kind of warrior sort of mentality. But it's, again, that's forgetting, yes, on the surface, it might appear that way, but that's forgetting the why behind everything. I want to better myself and be a better man so that I can be that person for my family, that person for my friends, that person for my neighbor. So it's always going back to that core idea of why are you doing this? Why are you pursuing virtue? And yes, I better myself, but the idea is I am becoming a better product to be involved in the world and interact with the world. So that's how I think of it, because I've always struggled with this idea of Stoicism not being a philosophy of really compassion and love and care. It's not something of like rigid, I'm on my own and it's me or nobody kind of thing. It's you have to find what is the way that I can use my special skills and talents to put the most positive good into the world. That's what you're so that's why you kind of has this connotation of being a individualistic philosophy, is because you do spend a lot of time in introspection. You do spend a lot of time working on yourself, finding your faults, fixing those faults, and then moving on with the ultimate goal of serving the community and serving the collective. But Benny, what about for you? How do you think of this idea of, with Stoicism as it comes, and not only the community aspect to it, but also this idea of living in accordance with nature? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a very important point, right? Especially after what you said, and I think you voiced it very well about the kind of how the dichotomy of individual and the whole kind of works together. And that's what the Stoics tell us. We never do things. This comes from Socrates. We never do things that are not beneficial to us, right? If we do things that are not virtuous, then we do them out of ignorance, because we don't know what the right thing to do is. And that's where we need education, we need knowledge, we need the right examples. But where the Stoics come from, and this kind of brings it towards this kind of like, what is the Stoic God? And this is within the Stoic communities, a lot of conversation. Oh, you've got to believe in God to be a Stoic, or you can be agnostic, or but if we really look at it, it's the Stoics, they were pantheistic. They believe, like, you can read about the providence and the divine and God, and but what they meant, and they use this word a lot, is nature. They say, like, they call themselves cosmopolitanism. You can look at Hierocles. He had these circles that would go from the self to the immediate family to the big cosmos in general. And they said, like, all of what they call the logos and all of that is reason and logic, it's rationality, right? And we have been given a part of that. And that's where, if we want to live in accordance with nature, if we want to find that peace, then we've got to use that as well for ourselves. And by doing so, we will get closer to the entire cosmos, to all of the parts that we are connected to. So then we become better in the community, in the society, because we are doing what we are supposed to be doing. We are looking at who we are, our strengths, our weaknesses. We are looking at the roles we are playing. And that's where we kind of come into these three parts of Stoicism: the ethics, the logic, and the physics, right? This is more the physics part that we're talking about, of like, what is the nature in general and what kind of role do we part in that? And then we have the ethics, means like we should be playing the right role according to who we are, right? For example, now we are trying to convey the message of Stoicism. Our duty, our responsibility is to do the best job that we can be doing, right? Yes, we might make mistakes here and there, but we are trying to do the best, and we grow, what Brendan said, that progress. Well, why are we doing it? For the bigger picture, but we will also learn from it ourselves. So it's this intricate thing that works both ways. And I think that that's something that we've got to keep in mind, of how the Stoics looked at it. So it's easy to say, oh, yes, it is individualistic. You're only working on yourself. Yes, but I'm doing it with the bigger picture, with the society and community in mind. And that's where I feel like, if I become better, then everybody will profit. And I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for those around me. And that's where I see nature. And that's where I think that we should really be looking at this. And so it is our duty as an individual to look at everything, not to act out of the emotions, but to act out of reason and logic. And by doing so, we will get closer to nature, the big capital N nature, but also our own nature, and to the people around us. And that's where we have that kind of dual existence between the self and the bigger picture. And I kind of touched on the emotions as well. I wanted to debunk that straight, as well. We talked a bit about the selfishness of some people think about Stoicism, but another one, and you kind of heard it in the intro, is where people think that we might turn into emotionless creatures, right? And I wanted to pass that over to you, Brendan, because I've been called sometimes like an emotional creature where I don't show emotions as much, but I wanted to see how you view the emotions and Stoicism together.
No, that's a great question, Benny. And I think it's important to kind of understand this at the onset of kind of the journey in Stoicism. Is it is absolutely not the point of Stoicism to suppress your emotions. That is 100% not the goal. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The point of emotions and what emotions are, according to us here at Via Stoica and the Stoics, is it's data. It's a signal. It's something that your body is sending you a message that says, hey, this thing makes me sad. This thing makes me anxious. This thing makes me angry, whatever that may be. And it's your job and it's your duty to figure out how to navigate those. Because the point of emotions and what Stoics try to do is to feel the emotion, to experience the emotion, but to not let it dictate what we then do with our actions. So if you feel anger, that's fine. No one's going to complain about feeling anger, and you shouldn't try and suppress that from your body. But what you do want to try and control is the response you have because you feel angry. So if you feel angry and then you start yelling, cursing at someone, making them feel bad, or even worse, physically assaulting them in some way, that's not acting like a Stoic. Right. So the anger is fine. You can have anger and be fine and still consider yourself moving along on your Stoic journey. But the second you start acting out of anger and letting that be the thing that dictates what you do, and you ignore your reason and logic, well, now you're not living in accordance with nature. And just to explain that little piece, because that was something that took me a minute to sort of understand, is the Stoics talk a lot about living in accordance with your nature. And so they look to the natural world for answers sometimes when they have questions. So as they were questioning, what are we as humans? What is our duty to do? They noticed that what we have that many things in the rest of the animal kingdom doesn't have is this higher level thinking, this higher level brain that allows us to have reason and logic. So if that's what we have been given by the logos or the gods or whomever you want to call it, if we've been given this thing, then that's the thing we should be pursuing. That's the thing we should be working on, is really cultivating our reason and logic, really cultivating how we can be a better version of ourselves. So that is where this idea of like looking into nature, and then why the philosophy is so centered in virtue and reason and logic, is because that is naturally what humans have over, other species in the natural world.
Yeah, I love that part, and I think that that's a good reminder to have, right? To make sure that, we are not here to suppress those emotions, but we need to understand they're a source of information. That's how I look at it, right? They're a source of information of telling us who we are and what we can do and what triggers us and what are the parts that influence our behavior and our thinking. And that's where we've got to use that information to, again, went out to do is like to know ourselves, and that's how we can use those things. And the Stoics, they really look at this Greek word called apatheia, which sometimes feels like nowadays it's more or less like translated as like apathy, right? But and for them, it was more to not be ruled or mastered by excessive negative emotions. That what they call the pathe or the pathos, like anger, grief, sadness, but even over jubilant pleasure or joy, pleasure. But they would look at to focus and cultivate the eupatheia, which would be the positive emotions like joy, but also to have more, to live in that moderation, right? And to be cautious. All these kind of more positive emotions that are sprung from the virtues. Right, by being virtuous, you will experience joy, and that's what they really looked for. And if you're struggling with these Greek terms, on viastoica.com, we have a glossary that can help you understand them if you do want to delve into them a little bit more. But that's really how the Stoics look at emotions. They're not suppressing them; they're a source of information, and that information can help you grow as a person. Because if you get angry at something, and oftentimes anger is more of a secondary emotion because you might be fearful and that will make you angry. You might be sad and that will make you angry. But instead of acting out of that anger, why not just look at the thing that is making you angry? Marcus Aurelius says, you choose to be harmed, and you can also choose not to be harmed. And that is the great part of, like, even Epictetus says, isn't it great that we know that our feeling harm or hurt is up to us? So we can make that decision to say, hey, I'm not going to be hurt by this, but let me see why this was hurting me from the beginning. And that's where we have this breakdown between the impulse, because we have impulsive emotions, we have things happening to us, and we will get in a certain state, we have a certain opinion, we have a certain judgment, and that happens instantaneously. We can't really do much about that. Stoics acknowledge that fact, that we can't do much about that. But what we can do, instead of acting out of that rashly and that impulse, we can pause. Why we have the newsletter, the pause. You can subscribe to it on our website. But we think that that's a very important concept, because we want to be able to pause, to reflect, to check our impressions, to make sure that what we are reacting to is actually true. Why am I reacting to it in this way? And then making sure that we use reason to make the right action. That's the workflow that we've got to work with. And then afterwards, once we get out of that moment, when we needed to act, we can use reflection to look back. Why was I responding to this impulse, to this event in such a way? The Stoics say, like, no event is good or bad. All the externals are just what they are, external events. We add that label of good and bad to it. And then we've got to make sure that we decide what the right course of action to take is. And that's where we've got to work towards. So when we look at the emotions, we can decide how we react to them, but also we can decide how they will influence us later. And that's where the growth is. That's where our personal growth is. So as we move along, we have a couple of, these great concepts. We talked about the virtues, nature, the emotions, but we also have the dichotomy of control. And that kind of touches on the emotions as well. The dichotomy of control is really brought home and forward by Epictetus, where he talks about what is up to us and what isn't up to us. And Epictetus he's one of the Roman philosophers, Stoics. Most of his writing is still there, although it's not his personal writing, it's from one of his students. But there are two sections. You have the discourses, which are pretty much notes of his lectures, and you have the handbook. And Arrian put these two together. And he starts with the dichotomy of control. He starts with both of them, right? So we talk about what is up to us and what isn't up to us. And when we look at the emotions, which we just talked about, we can see that this dichotomy really helps us to separate, what is external, what isn't external, what is up to us. And Epictetus brings it down to this really simple dichotomy. He says, what is up to us are our thoughts, our opinions, our judgments, pretty much everything that is our own action, right? Everything that goes on into our mind. What isn't up to us is everything external. Even our body isn't up to us. We can live healthy, but we might still fall ill or have an accident or whatever. Reputation, money, status, fame, all of that is not up to us. And that's what we've got to learn to separate. So as we kind of touch on this topic, I wanted to see, Brendan, how do you feel about the dichotomy of control, and what can you tell us? For me,
the dichotomy of control is a really good framework because it's simple. I like simple. I like simple rules that give me simple tasks. And the task that the dichotomy of control gives me is I am only concerned about my thoughts, my opinions, and my actions. And the biggest, unlock for me when I first, kind of started to absorb the dichotomy of control and understand its purpose was to no longer care about the opinions of others. That was something that I did care about, that I was concerned about. I want people to like me. I want people to, think I'm funny or whatever. I don't know. But like once I stopped caring, life became a whole lot easier. I just started doing whatever I wanted and stopped being concerned about what this person thought or that person thought. And that was the biggest help for me to sort of alleviate some stress and anxiety that I would experience around certain things. So I think the dichotomy of control is one of those things that even if you never want to study Stoic philosophy, you should consider the dichotomy of control. And it is the basis for a lot of, therapies today, self-help books, they all kind of do a remix version of the dichotomy of control for the most part. I'm actually reading a book right now called The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. And the whole thing is just let them do whatever, like let them be their person. You don't control them. And I'm just like, and the whole thing is Stoicism, so a lot of the self-help industry is really based on not just philosophy in general, but Stoicism specifically. And not only that, but this very core tenet of Stoicism from Epictetus, which is the dichotomy dichotomy of control and focusing only on our thoughts, actions, and opinions, and not concerning ourselves with the thoughts, actions, and opinions of others. But that to me is really the big key, and definitely one that helps a lot in the journey. And that, so yeah, that's to me one of the best ones is the dichotomy of control, just because I think it's so simple to understand and so simple to put into action.
Nice, and I like that, and this is also kind of the segue where we go into what really Stoicism really stands out, and what makes it really important is the practical part, right? Even Epictetus, in a great book by John Sellers on Stoicism, he actually thinks that Epictetus was the reason why we don't have a lot of text right now anymore from the Stoics, because Epictetus was like, don't read books. Don't go and dive into the books and just, put your head in this text. No, make sure that you are putting your head in life. That's where you've got to live it, right? So that's an interesting theory that was put out there by John Sellers. And kind of when we make that pivot, the dichotomy of control is such a practical thing that we can apply. And I had the same thing with the opinions of people. And then you can really like, hey, that opinion isn't up to me, that is. And I liked one of those quotes by Marcus Aurelius that I always bring up, is like, that showed me the practicality, was like, that person is bound to act that way. I can't change that person, but I can change how I react to that person. And that's what I've got to focus on, instead of trying to be, I can maybe influence them. That's where we can maybe talk about the trichotomy of control that William Irvine brings up in his Guide to the Good Life, where I can influence things, but my sphere of influence can only reach this far. For example, my physical sphere of influence can only reach until like my hand reaches or whatever, and my verbal and other. So that's kind of that difference thing. So once we understand that, it's really practical. But we have more practical things that can help us as we start to wrap this episode up on what is Stoicism. And one of them that I like to start with is the amor fati one. Then it's not really, it's coined by Nietzsche. He was a critic of Stoicism, and the more modern Stoics now that we are living in, they kind of took that as like, oh, amor fati sounds great. But it's really about accepting fate. And if you read Seneca's letters, if you read Epictetus, and even Marcus Aurelius, the three Roman Stoics in which we have the text left, they really talk about this all the time, right? We can't control fate. We have to accept it. We have to accept the moment that we are in, and then make the right thing out of it. And for me, that really helped me kind of lose the sense of having regrets. But I just accept my past for what it is, for where I am right now, and not to worry too much about the future, because that's not even happened yet. I don't even know if it's going to happen. I can try to prepare myself, but I have to live in the moment. That brings us to that correlation I made at the very beginning, for like being more of the practical Buddhist kind of philosophy, where Buddhism and mindfulness and Stoicism is pretty much all about mindfulness. It's focusing on the right here and the right now. And that's what something like amor fati, accepting your fate, loving your fate, embracing it, saying, this is where I am right now. I'm going to embrace this. And whatever it is, I have all the tools and all the things in me to deal with this moment. And that gives me a lot of confidence and power. But how do you feel about the amor fati, and what does that help you in life? And then what other tool do you have, Brendan?
So for me, Benny, amor fati is really it's really something that's, I think, extremely powerful once you really understand it. And I think the Stoics do a great job at telling us how this works. They talk about something called a Stoic reverse clause. And that's, to me, what amor fati really means, is you love your fate. You love everything that's being given to you, that's being delivered to you. And it's going to make you better, even when it sucks. When you've spent hours and hours writing that paper, and then it accidentally gets deleted off your computer. That's terrible. But it also gives you the opportunity to do it again and write that paper better, and improve on what you had already done. So the Stoics are great at reversing things that seem like a challenge, seem like a problem, seem like something that's going to be an obstacle for them, because they know that the obstacle is the way. The obstacle is the thing that we have to get through to ultimately get to where we need to be. If this obstacle is being put in your path, fate is putting it there for a reason, and you need to go through it, because you need to gain a new skill, or learn something about yourself, or learn something about another person. But at the end of the day, once you start believing and truly accepting that, like, okay, everything that comes to me is supposed to be here. I'm supposed to meet these challenges today. I'm supposed to go through these difficulties. You view it with a much more sense of gratitude, really. And it does help you to kind of be like, I'm grateful for this challenge. I'm grateful for these things that have happened to me. Stoicism has helped me the most dealing with the grief of losing my mother unexpectedly. And while that happened initially, and I never would have signed up for that, now that I've gone through it and I have years to look back on and kind of reflect on what I've done, that experience has forced me to grow in ways that no other experience has. And I love my fate. I love that the thing that happened to me. I lost my mom very young. That's unfortunate, but it's going to make me a better person as I move forward. And that is the real power behind Stoicism, is that you can turn any bad situation, no matter how terrible, no matter how abysmal, into a positive experience, into something that you grow from, that you learn from. And that's really what, to me, what Amor Fati kind of represents is that you can take anything and throw it in the fire, and the fire gets bigger, the fire gets better. So that's why you see Amor Fati often displayed in a way that is a fire or some sort of, because that is kind of like the fire of life, is the way I think about it. We're always going to be growing through it, and we don't want the flame to burn out. We want the flame to keep going. And sometimes you have to throw challenges in the fire to keep it going. Sometimes it's happy times you throw in the fire, but sometimes you get some tough cards dealt, and that's just fate giving you a challenge that you need to have. So that's the way I look at it. And as far as other tools or things, I think another important one is memento mori, remembering that you die. And this is definitely something that is connected with Buddhism as well. They have a practice where, the Buddhists try and think about death 5 times a day. So this is very much in line with what they believe as well. But really, it's just the reminder that we're going to die, and that because we're going to die, we should be grateful for everything that we have. Every day that we're alive and we can breathe and walk around, that's a good day, regardless of the issues that might come up, regardless of the difficult people that we have to deal with. We have a day on this earth. And I think also it's a reminder too to be thankful for the people you have in your life, because they will die too. They will go. I had a limited amount of time with my mother. So thankfully, I used that time to its fullest. But you have a limited amount of time with the people in your life. So be grateful for them. When you wake up in the morning and all your family is alive and well, that's a great day. You've already won. Nothing else has to happen after that for you to be a winner of that day. So that, to me, I think, is if you can adopt those 2 ideas and really live by them, and they all are kind of centered in gratitude. But if you can adopt those 2 ideas, I really think it helps in life, and it helps to gain that life of tranquility and peace and calm that we're all really after.
Yeah, I love that stuff. And memento mori is such a great point as well. And this is, Michel de Montaigne has an essay about, death. He says to philosophize is to learn how to die. And that's what the Stoics said as well, to be able to think about life, but also to accept our faith. And they said death isn't a bad thing. How can something that is so natural, that happens to everything, can be a bad thing, right? If it's ingrained in nature, and it's pretty much change, right? It's that constant change, like things are lost or things are gone and things are reborn, right? So that's what we've got to keep in mind. And for me, Seneca said it, he said, life, it's because of death that you're precious in my eyes. And that's something that we've got to remember. It shouldn't be this thing that fears us, that keeps us from living, but it should be something that sparks us to be alive right now and to pay attention. And this is something that Simone Weil said. She said, attention is love. That's what we've got to remember, that, what Brennan said, the people around us, the things that we love, everything here might be taken from us at any instant. But while I'm here, while I have this moment of life, while I have this moment with someone, let me pay attention to them, because I can give them my time. But time without attention is pretty much like an insult, right? Here's my time, but I'm not really spending it with you anyway. But if I give you my time and my attention, I'm here for you, right? I'm here, I'm listening, I'm in your life, and I feel that connection far stronger than if at the next moment that person is gone, I can at least say, I've spent my time, my little precious time, the best way possible. So a lot of the times when we talk about these things, people kind of hunch back and say, oh, that's a little bit morbid to talk about death. No, we should talk about it. It's something that's going to happen. And the more we talk about it, the more we reason about it, the more we find out what we are so afraid of for it, about it, we can take that sting out of it, and we can start to learn to live more freely and not have that hang over us as a master that we want to avoid at all costs. So I think that those are one of the important things. And as we really start to wrap it up, one last thing that I wanted to bring up is the preferred indifferences, because I think that is a really important one as well. And I wanted to kind of have Brendan kick that off, the preferred indifferences. But how do you feel about them, and why are they so important in Stoicism?
Well, that's a great question, Benny, and I'm glad that we are kind of wrapping up with this at the end, because I think it's an important differentiation to kind of figure out is we understand the idea that we have preferred things in life. And, I think an easy one is money. Of course, I would always prefer to have more money, but I'm also going to just survive and be just as happy with less. And that's kind of the idea of preferred indifference. Of course, I want to be healthy. I want to have a functioning body and functioning legs and functioning lungs and all these things. But, fate can take that away from me at any point. So I need to be indifferent to whether my body works, because it can be taken from me. I can get a disease, I can break my leg, I can get hit by a car at any moment. These things can happen. And so depending on them, and kind of, yeah, like depending on them being there all the time is kind of setting yourself up for disaster. Sometimes it can make you vulnerable. So when you tell yourself that, hey, at any moment I could lose my legs and I may never walk again, let me appreciate walking today. Let me go, like, and this is where I think the perverted indifference can also kind of be that thing, like with Omar Fati, where you start to really appreciate it. Like, let me appreciate this while I have it. I'm indifferent to whether I continue to have it. I'm indifferent whether, I think too about, like, when I got my first job, and I went out and I bought like myself a nice watch once I was making like decent money, and I, had a little extra change to throw around. I went and got a decent watch and I wore it. I loved it. I was just, I was really proud of myself for being able to do this and reaching these goals that I had and achieving things and blah, blah, blah. And I remember the time where I went out to a bar or something. And while I was walking into a bar, I kind of hit it on like a table or something. And I got a little scuff on it, a little scrape. And I was so upset. And then I realized, I'm like, well, if I'm going to use the watch, it's going to get scraped. It's going to get scuffs on it. It's going to get damaged. It's not going to be pristine anymore because I'm taking it out into the world to be a watch and do its job. So I realized I had to be indifferent, even though this thing was something I valued and it was something that I spent money on. It was like, well, if I'm going to use it, then I'm going to have to be indifferent to the fact that it's going to get marks on it sometimes, and it might get a little messed up and not look perfect anymore. And that is the idea of really preferred indifference. It's a way to kind of release your own anxieties or things like that around, and it's usually to do with stuff. I think stuff and our bodies are kind of the easy ones for people to understand. But yeah, preferred indifference is a way to understand the dichotomy of control really in practical terms. Like, I don't control whether the money is going to stick in my account or not, right? I can control what I buy and but that tax man's also coming too. The IRS needs to get paid. Sometimes unexpected bills occur, and I can't plan for those, and I can't depend on a major car repair not happening tomorrow, right? So I have to be indifferent to whether my car works or not. So it's really just a way to release ourselves of things that can tie us down and break our will. So it's becoming indifferent to things that might be a problem for us in the future. We become indifferent to them now so that they aren't as jarring in the future. But what about you, Benny? How do you think about preferred indifferences, and what is that? Why are those important to you?
Yeah, and great stuff. And for me, the preferred indifference is really geared towards being free and not being chained down. And if you read the discourses by Epictetus, he calls people like, you slave, you are a slave to all these externals. And that's why I like Epictetus. But he really puts it to where it really matters, right? And yeah, we talk about the dichotomy of control, and we get asked a lot of questions like, so I can't have nice things if I'm a Stoic? Yes, you can. But as long as those things don't start owning you, and like Brendan said about the watch, yeah, you might get scratches on it because it's a watch. It's going to be used, right? If you have a car outside and you're up at night thinking if that car is going to be stolen or scratched, then maybe you don't want to have that car because it's taking your mental capabilities away from where it needs to be, and you want to be calm, right? So we all have these things on loan, whether it's things, whether it's people, they come and go, and we have to remind ourselves that even without those things, even without money, even without health, even without all those things that we desire, we can still be a good person. We can still use the virtues. We can still be living in accordance with nature and use our reason and logic. That doesn't prevent us from anything if we don't have those things. And that's why they are preferred indifferences. Where the cynics, they wouldn't even touch on those things. They said, I don't want anything. There's a story about Diogenes, who was a cynic who had a little cup, and then he was drinking from the cup, and then he saw a little boy drinking from his hands, and he got angry. He's like, why am I using this cup? I need to get rid of that. But the Stoics, they realized, yeah, life is about practicality. There's things that come my way. Let me welcome them when they are here. But when they are gone, let me just say them farewell and thank you for their service, and deal with what I have right now. So for me, this is really about being free from all those chains and all those externals that tie us down to something and that make us do things outside of virtue, outside of our nature, because we want to get them. And that's what Epictetus talks about a lot, about our desires, our wants, and our aversions. Those are the things we've got to work on. We've got to make sure that they don't guide us to what we do. We've got to guide ourselves through virtue and through our nature. And that's what we've got to work towards. So those are some of the practical things, and we can go on. This could be like an episode of 2, 3, 4 hours, and Brendan and I have a usual long conversations after these recordings about this as well, and many other things. And we will have episodes on all of these things more separate, so you can learn more about them. And leave a comment to let us know what you want to learn more about and what you'd like us to share more about. If you have questions, come to us. You can also book a free consultation if you want to work on these things and really make this into a practical philosophy for you. You can go to viastoica.com and book a free consultation and speak to either one of us, and then we can see where we can help you. Or listen to the podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe as well. So, but no, from my side, thank you for listening. Brendan, I want to give the last closing words to you, and then we wrap it up.
Yeah, well said, Benny. And no, I think this was a great episode. Definitely gave a good overview of kind of what Stoicism is, and then the basic core components of it. So thank you for giving us, like Benny said earlier, when you give someone your time and your attention, that's love. So thank you for giving us your time and attention throughout this conversation. And if you think these are things that you want to dig more into and how we can apply those into your life, we would love to give our time and attention to you completely for free with a free consultation. You can book those on viastoica.com. And we would love to get to know you, love to speak with you, at least just for that one meeting. It's always a great way to get to know our listeners a little bit and interact with you guys on a deeper level. So again, thank you for always supporting the podcast and supporting and listening. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to the Via Stoica Podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review. Your feedback will help us reach more like-minded people on the journey to self-improvement. If you want to get in touch with us or find more information, you can go to viastoica.com, your one-stop platform for all things Stoicism and living better. And remember, virtue is the only good.